Before we begin, it is important to understand that the albums covered in this video explore some of the darkest, most unsettling corners of the human experience. Themes of death, despair, mental illness, trauma, and existential dread are woven into the music you're about to learn about. Some of these works are emotionally intense, disturbing, and confrontational, pushing the boundaries of what many would consider comfortable listening. This video is not for everyone. If you are sensitive to dark, disturbing content, viewer discretion is strongly advised. The intent here is not to glorify or sensationalize these themes, but to explore how music can reflect the complexities of the human condition, even when it ventures into uncomfortable territory. Proceed with caution as we descend the abyss.
Welcome back to the weird, depressing, and disturbing albums Iceberg. We've already ventured into the unsettling world of Tier 2, where music starts to bend and break the boundaries of reality. Now, as we continue into Part 2, the descent grows even darker. The albums we're about to explore take us deeper into chaos, dissonance, and emotional extremes. If you thought Part 1 was disturbing, you'll find what lies ahead only amplifies the sense of dread and disarray. The sounds become more fragmented, the emotions more raw, and the themes more unsettling. These are albums that challenge not just the listener, but the very nature of music itself. Prepare yourself as we continue our dive into Tier 2, Part 2 of the Iceberg, where darkness, chaos, and unease take center stage. As we move into Part 2 of Tier 2, the music continues to spiral further away from conventional sounds and deeper into emotional and sonic disarray. The albums in this section push even harder against the boundaries of what we recognize as music. They distort reality, blur the lines between sound and noise, and confront the listener with raw, unsettling truths. These are works that dive headfirst into themes of disillusionment, madness, and existential despair. The chaos you've heard so far only hints at what's to come. The deeper we go, the more the familiar falls away, leaving behind music that feels like a direct challenge to your senses. The unsettling atmosphere is more palpable here, where every sound seems designed to provoke discomfort, to push you out of your comfort zone, and into a space of pure emotional and psychological disturbance. Prepare to leave behind the known and step into the unknown as we delve into the second half of Tier 2. Clipping. There existed an addiction to blood. Our first descent into Tier 2 Part 2 brings us to an album that feels like a horror movie brought to life through sound. This is not just music, it's an experience drenched in blood, fear, and violence. The album draws on the aesthetics of horror, but mixes it with harsh realities of modern life, creating a nightmarish vision of the world. The sound is abrasive, built on industrial noise, sharp, jarring beats, and unsettling samples. There's an ominous lurking presence in the music, one that feels like it's stalking you, waiting to strike. Every track feels drenched in dread, the kind that crawls into your skin and refuses to leave. But what makes this album even more disturbing is the way it blends its horror elements with social commentary. It uses themes of violence, blood, and terror as metaphors for systemic oppression and trauma. Lyrically, the album explores the violence embedded in society and how it seeps into the very fabric of life. The horror here isn't just fantasy, it's real, rooted in human suffering and injustice. The combination of horror and harsh realism creates an atmosphere of overwhelming tension. There are moments where the music feels like it's on the verge of breaking apart, held together only by the weight of its own darkness. The dissonant beats, distorted sounds, and chilling vocal delivery push you into a space where terror and truth intertwine. This album doesn't give you room to breathe. It grabs hold of you from the first track and drags you deeper into its violent, blood-soaked vision of reality. It's an unflinching look at the darkness within society, and how that darkness consumes everything in its path. In this entry, the line between horror and reality fades, leaving you with nothing but an intense, visceral fear, and the unsettling understanding that the blood being spilt is all too real. Lo, I Could Live in Hope. Our next entry takes us into a place of quiet despair, an album that captures the emptiness and fragility of hope, as if it's something barely holding on. This work is defined by its dark minimalism, with delicate, slow-moving arrangements that feel like they're floating in a void. It's the sound of a mind retreating inward, sinking into melancholy and uncertainty. The music itself is deceptively simple, soft, repetitive rhythms and gentle guitar melodies that stretch out into long, meditative passages. But within that simplicity is a profound sense of emotional weight. Each note lingers, as if it's trying to fill the empty spaces left behind by something lost. The vocals, delivered in a hushed, almost fragile tone, add to the feeling of isolation and vulnerability. Thematically, the album explores the tension between hope and despair. It's not about grand gestures or dramatic outbursts. It's about the slow, quiet unraveling of the self. The lyrics reflect a deep sense of longing, but also a resignation that hope might be nothing more than a fleeting illusion. The slow, deliberate pace of the music mirrors that internal struggle, as if the songs are trying to hold on to something that's slipping away. What makes this album so unsettling is its quietness. There's no chaos here, no violent outbursts, just a slow, steady descent into emotional numbness. It's the sound of someone who feels disconnected from the world, trying to make sense of their own loneliness. And the more you listen, the more you're drawn into that stillness, where every sound feels like a quiet echo of something you've lost. In this entry, the quiet despair lingers long after the music fades, leaving you with a haunting sense of emptiness and the unsettling realization that hope, for all its promise, may not be enough. Nick Drake, Pink Moon. Our next entry is an album that feels like a whisper in the dark, a soft, fragile piece of music that captures the beauty and sorrow of isolation. This album is not just an intimate look into the artist's mind, it's a quiet farewell, filled with a deep sense of melancholy that permeates every note. The music is stripped down to its bare essentials: gentle acoustic guitar, soft vocals, and the occasional piano. There's no grand production here, no elaborate arrangements. Instead, the simplicity of the sound creates an almost unbearable closeness, as if you're sitting right there with the artist, feeling every emotion as it pours through the music. Lyrically, the album touches on themes of existential reflection, loss, and fleeting moments of hope. But that hope always feels distant, like something just out of reach. There's an undeniable beauty in the melodies, but it's a beauty tinged with sadness, as if the music itself is mourning something that's already been lost. What makes this album so haunting is its sense of quiet resignation. The voice and the music are delicate, almost fragile, as if they might break at any moment. And while the songs are beautiful, there's an underlying sense that it's not just music. It's an emotional release, a way for the artist to express something deeply personal and painful, without ever fully revealing what that pain is. In this entry, the music leaves you with a lingering sense of sadness, like the fading light of a setting sun. It's a reminder that sometimes the most profound emotions are found not in the grandest gestures, but in the quiet moments where everything feels fragile and fleeting. KMFDM, Opium. Our next descent takes us into a world of relentless industrial noise and raw rebellion. This album doesn't ask for your attention, it demands it, with a sound that feels like a mechanical assault on the senses. It's aggressive, unpolished, and filled with an anarchic energy that leaves no room for compromise. The music is built on pounding repetitive beats, distorted guitars, and harsh electronic noise. It's an industrial soundscape that feels cold and dystopian, as if you've been thrust into a world where the machinery of society is breaking down. There's a sense of anger and frustration driving every track, with vocals that cut through the noise like a call to arms. Thematically, the album reflects a deep distrust of authority and the structures of power. It's rebellious to its core, railing against societal oppression and the dehumanizing effects of modern life. The lyrics are often cryptic, but they carry a clear message of defiance, a refusal to submit to the forces that seek to control or silence individual expression. What makes this album so unsettling is its relentlessness. The harsh, repetitive beats and mechanical sounds create an oppressive atmosphere, like you're trapped in a machine that's slowly grinding you down. There's no respite, no moment of quiet reflection, just a constant barrage of noise and anger, reflecting a world that feels increasingly chaotic and uninhabitable. In this entry, the line between man and machine blurs, leaving you with a sense of unease as the mechanical rhythms pulse through your mind. It's a vision of rebellion in a world that feels cold, industrial, and dangerously close to collapse. Joji, Chloe Burbank, Volume 1. Our next entry shifts into a space of quiet introspection, where melancholy is delivered through minimalistic, lo-fi productions and emotional raw lyrics. This album is intimate, capturing a sense of loneliness and vulnerability that feels deeply personal, yet universal in its appeal. The music here is delicate, built on simple piano melodies, soft beats, and layered vocals. There's a DIY aesthetic to the production that gives the album a lo-fi, almost homemade quality. This rawness works in its favor, allowing the emotional weight of each track to shine through without the distraction of heavy production. It feels like a series of late-night thoughts, private, unpolished, and deeply human. Thematically, this album touches on feelings of isolation, heartbreak, and the longing for connection. It's a reflection of the fragility of modern relationships and the emotional turmoil that comes with trying to find meaning in a world that often feels indifferent. The lyrics are simple, but there's a quiet intensity to them, as if every word is chosen carefully to reflect the underlying sadness that runs through the album. What makes this album unsettling in its own way is its subtlety. It doesn't confront you with overwhelming darkness, but instead invites you into a space of quiet reflection, where the sadness creeps in slowly. The lo-fi production and minimal instrumentation create an atmosphere that feels both intimate and distant, like you're listening to someone confess their deepest thoughts from the other side of a wall. In this entry, the music leaves you with a lingering sense of solitude, as if you've been allowed to glimpse into a private world of emotional vulnerability. It's not a descent into chaos or despair, but rather a quiet, slow-burning reflection on the loneliness that exists within us all. Brian Eno, Here Come the Warm Jets. Our next entry takes a sharp turn into the experimental and unpredictable. This album is a chaotic blend of genres and styles, pushing the boundaries of what music can be. It's playful, yet disorienting, avant-garde but still grounded in rock, creating a strange sense of unease beneath its quirky surface. The sound is eclectic, a fusion of glam rock, art rock, and bizarre electronic textures. Each track feels like it's balancing on the edge of chaos, with jagged guitar riffs, distorted vocals, and unexpected shifts in rhythm and tone. The music is vibrant and colorful, yet there's an underlying dissonance that leaves you feeling slightly off balance, like something's not quite right. Lyrically, the album is just as unpredictable. The words often seem nonsensical, fragmented, or surreal, but they fit the music's free-form, experimental nature. It feels less like a cohesive narrative and more like a series of vivid, disjointed images, as if you're listening to a dream where logic has been thrown out the window. The strangeness of the lyrics only adds to the overall sense of unpredictability, pulling the listener further into its weird, fractured world. What makes this album unsettling isn't overt darkness or heaviness, it's the way it plays with your expectations. Just when you think you understand where a song is going, it shifts in a completely different direction, leaving you disoriented. There's a sense of controlled chaos in the production, as if everything could fall apart at any moment, but never quite does. In this entry, the familiar and the bizarre clash, leaving you in a liminal space between comfort and confusion. It's an album that embraces experimentation to its fullest, creating a soundscape where the rules are constantly shifting, and in doing so, it keeps you on edge, unsure of what's coming next. Manic Street Preachers, The Holy Bible. Our next entry is an album that confronts you with raw, unfiltered darkness, an intense, visceral look at the worst of human nature. This isn't just a record. It's an emotional gut punch filled with lyrics that cut deep, reflecting on themes of war, self-destruction, depression, and political unrest. It's angry, disillusioned, and doesn't shy away from showing the brutality of life. The music itself is aggressive, blending punk, rock, and post-punk influences into a hard-hitting, abrasive sound that feels like a constant assault. Gritty guitars, driving bass lines, and relentless percussion form the backdrop for lyrics that are as confrontational as they are poetic. It's the kind of music that drags you into the heart of darkness, forcing you to confront it head-on. Lyrically, the album dives into some of the heaviest subjects imaginable: self-hatred, eating disorders, fascism, and the horror of war. The words are sharp, pointed, and delivered with a biting intensity. There's a sense of deep emotional and psychological turmoil embedded in every line, with no attempt to sugarcoat or soften the impact. The album forces the listener to grapple with uncomfortable truths about the human condition, society, and personal suffering. What makes this album particularly disturbing is its emotional rawness. There's no distance between the music and the pain it conveys. It's an uncompromising look at the dark side of life, where hope seems distant, if not entirely absent. The intensity of the lyrics is matched by the intensity of the sound, creating a relentless barrage of emotions that are difficult to shake off. In this entry, the bleakness is not just a theme, it's a constant presence. The music leaves you feeling drained, having taken you through a journey of disillusionment, pain, and frustration. It's an album that refuses to let you look away from the darkness, and in doing so, it becomes one of the most unsettling entries in this tier. Converge, Jane Doe. Our next entry plunges us into a world of pure, unrelenting intensity. An album that's both a sonic assault and an emotional wrecking ball. This isn't just music. It's a visceral experience filled with raw aggression, chaotic energy, and a deep, almost unbearable sense of personal destruction. It's the sound of complete emotional collapse captured in its most brutal form. The music is fast, abrasive, and chaotic, with dissonant guitars, rapid-fire drums, and vocals that feel like they're being torn from the artist's throat. It's a relentless barrage of sound that leaves no room to breathe. The shifts in tempo and tone are sudden and violent, creating a sense of disorientation, as if the ground beneath you is constantly shifting. There's no comfort here, only raw primal energy that feels like it's ripping everything apart. Lyrically, this album is deeply personal, reflecting on themes of heartbreak, loss, and the destruction of the self. The words are anguished, filled with pain and desperation, as if the artist is pouring every ounce of their suffering into the music. It's not just about the end of a relationship, it's about the complete breakdown of identity, feeling of being shattered into pieces with no way to put yourself back together. The imagery is haunting and violent, adding to the sense of total emotional collapse. What makes this album so disturbing is its intensity. It doesn't just express pain, it forces you to feel it. The sheer aggression of the sound, combined with the deeply personal lyrics, creates an atmosphere of emotional violence that is impossible to escape. The music feels like an open wound, raw and bleeding, with no attempt to heal or soothe. It's a relentless dive into personal destruction, and the more you listen, the deeper you're dragged into its emotional abyss. In this entry, the chaos and destruction are not just themes, they're the core of the experience. The music leaves you feeling shaken, as if you just witnessed something deeply personal and incredibly painful, and there's no way to walk away from it unchanged. We've now reached a point in the iceberg where the weight of what we've uncovered begins to sink in. The albums in this tier have taken us through despair, chaos, and confrontation with the darker sides of life and the mind. Each one is a journey deeper into unsettling emotions and experiences. Take a moment to reflect on the themes we've encountered: loneliness, rebellion, and the raw intensity of human suffering. This intermission is your chance to catch your breath before we dive in further. If you find this exploration as intriguing as it is unsettling, don't forget to like and subscribe so you can join us for the next step into the abyss. Prepare yourself, because the next descent is coming. Daughters, you won't get what you want. Our next entry thrusts you into a world of suffocating dread, where every sound feels like it's closing in around you. This album isn't just unsettling, it's overwhelming, an experience that wraps you in tension and anxiety from the first note to the last. There's no escape here, just a descent into a nightmarish atmosphere that leaves you grasping for air. The music is jagged and abrasive, with dissonant guitars, pounding drums, and vocals that teeter between the unhinged and the desperate. Each track feels like it's building to a breaking point that never comes, leaving you in a constant state of tension. The chaotic shifts in rhythm and structure only add to the feeling that the ground beneath you is constantly shifting, leaving you disoriented and trapped in the album's nightmarish world. Lyrically, the album dives into themes of fear, uncertainty, and the overwhelming sense that everything is spiraling out of control. The vocals are often screamed, strained, as if they're being torn from a mind on the edge. The words paint a picture of paranoia and existential dread, reflecting a world where nothing feels safe and everything feels unstable. It's a portrait of modern anxiety, a soundtrack for the feeling that no matter how hard you try, you'll never get what you need. What makes this album so disturbing is its relentlessness. The tension never breaks. The music constantly pushes you deeper into its claustrophobic atmosphere, refusing to give you a moment of relief. Every sound, every note feels like a weight pressing down on you, making it harder and harder to breathe. The experience is exhausting, but it's also impossible to turn away from. The album doesn't just ask you to listen, it pulls you into its dark, twisted world and refuses to let you go. In this entry, the anxiety is palpable, the fear is suffocating, and the dread is inescapable. You're left with the unsettling realization that no matter how far you descend, you'll never find the comfort you're looking for. Mount Eerie. A crow looked at me. This next entry brings us into a space of overwhelming grief, an album that feels less like a collection of songs and more like a series of raw, unfiltered thoughts about loss. There's no metaphor, no distance from the pain. It's all laid bare, making this album one of the most emotionally devastating entries in this tier. The music is minimal, almost fragile, built around soft acoustic guitars and delicate vocals. There's a quietness to it, as if the artist can barely summon the strength to sing. Every note feels heavy, not because of its sound, but because of the weight of the emotion behind it. The simplicity of the music only amplifies the depths of the sorrow being expressed. Lyrically, this album is a direct, brutally honest reflection on the death of a loved one. The words are painfully straightforward, describing the mundane reality of grief, the objects left behind, the moments of emptiness, the small things that trigger memories of the one who's gone. There's no attempt to dress the pain up with poetry or abstraction. It's a raw, direct account of what it feels like to lose someone and continue living in the shadows of that loss. What makes this album so unsettling is its honesty. It doesn't shy away from the most painful moments of grief, instead forcing the listener to confront them head on. There's no resolution, no comforting message of healing, just a stark reality of what it feels like to live with loss. It's an emotional weight that's hard to bear, and yet the vulnerability of the music draws you in. This is not an album that offers you closure. It offers a window into the grieving process, where the pain is constant, the memories are haunting, and the sense of absence is overwhelming. In this entry, the sadness lingers long after the music fades, leaving you with the uncomfortable reminder that some wounds never fully heal. Darkthrone, Transilvanian Hunger. Our next ascent takes us into the cold, unrelenting world of black metal. This album is not just a cornerstone of the genre. It embodies its darkest, most extreme elements. Raw, minimalist, and almost inhuman in its coldness. This work strips away all polish and delivers a sound that feels more like a force of nature than music. It's as if the very essence of cold, isolated darkness has been captured and put into sound. The production is deliberately lo-fi, with harsh, treble-heavy guitars, repetitive drumming, and distant, tortured vocals. It feels primitive, raw, as if it's meant to evoke a sense of freezing isolation. There's no warmth here, no melody to cling to, just an endless, repetitive barrage of sound that feels as relentless as a howling wind. The minimalism creates an atmosphere of bleakness, where each track feels like an icy journey deeper into an abyss of despair. Lyrically, the album is steeped in the imagery of darkness and death. The words are delivered in a cold, harsh rasp, almost unintelligible beneath the wall of sound. But that only adds to this sense of detachment, as if the vocals are coming from some distant, unreachable place. The themes touch on misanthropy, isolation, and the rejection of all things human. It's not just music for the sake of rebellion. It's music that feels like a manifesto of nihilism and darkness. What makes this album so disturbing is its unrelenting atmosphere. There's no moment of respite, no break from the cold, suffocating mood it creates. The repetitive nature of the music almost hypnotizes you, drawing you deeper into its dark, desolate world. It's as if the album is pulling you into a place where nothing grows, nothing feels, and nothing survives. In this entry, the coldness is both literal and metaphorical. The music feels distant, emotionless, and bleak, leaving you with the unsettling sense that you've been left alone in a vast, uncaring void. The Dreadnoughts, Foreign Skies. Our next entry takes us into the trenches of World War I, a place where human life and hope were crushed under the weight of war. This album is a tribute to the lives lost, a visceral reflection of the horrors of battle, and the unimaginable toll it took on those who lived through it. There's a deep sadness woven into the music, a sense of grief and anger at the senseless destruction of life. Musically, the album blends elements of folk and punk with melodies that feel almost nostalgic, like echoes from a distant past. But beneath the nostalgia is a deep well of pain. The rawness of the instrumentation, the driving rhythms, and the passionate vocals create an atmosphere that swings between mournful reflection and righteous fury. It's the sound of history told through the eyes of those who suffered, with every note carrying the weight of their loss. Lyrically, the album pulls no punches. It vividly describes the horrors of war, trenches filled with mud and blood, soldiers facing death at every turn, and the sheer madness of the battlefield. The lyrics bring to life the cold reality of conflict, the moments of terror, and the quiet despair that sets in when there's no way out. There's a bitter, almost resigned tone to many of the songs, as if the artist is trying to make sense of something that will never truly make sense. What makes this album so disturbing is its historical truth. The violence, the loss, the chaos, it all happened, and the music forces you to confront that reality. There's no romanticizing war here, only the brutal, heartbreaking truth of what it does to people. The songs are not just tributes to those who fought, they're reminders of the pain and the destruction that war leaves behind. In this entry, the past feels painfully present. The music leaves you with the haunting reminder that war is not just something that happens in history books. It's a scar on humanity that echoes through time, and it will never truly fade. Tim Buckley, Lorca. Our next entry takes a step away from conventional song structure and dives into the world of experimentation and emotional rawness. This album is not just music, it's a deeply haunting exploration of mood and feeling, pushing the boundaries of what folk and jazz can be. It's an unsettling, often disorienting journey into the depths of human emotion, where the line between beauty and despair become blurred. The music is sparse and unconventional, often built around meandering melodies and Buckley's soaring, melancholic voice. The structure feels loose, almost free-form, as if the songs are less concerned with guiding you along a path and more about immersing you in an emotional landscape. The combination of folk, jazz, and avant-garde elements creates a sound that feels otherworldly, like you've been transported to a place where time and form no longer matter. Lyrically, the album touches on themes of love, loss, and the inner turmoil that comes with being unable to fully express what's in your heart. The words are poetic, but often cryptic, leaving the listener to fill in the emotional gaps. There's a sadness that permeates every song, but it's a sadness that feels more like a reflection on the complexities of life itself, rather than any one specific event. What makes this album so unsettling is its sense of disconnection. The songs don't follow the usual pattern of build and release. Instead, they drift, leaving you in a space where emotions ebb and flow without resolution. Buckley's voice, with its haunting, almost ghostly quality, guides you through this dreamlike world, but it never fully grounds you. It's as if the album is constantly slipping away, leaving you with the sense that you're grasping at something intangible. In this entry, the music feels like a reflection of the fragility of human emotion. It's beautiful and haunting, but it leaves you with a lingering sense of unease, an understanding that some feelings can never truly be captured or explained. Lou Reed, Metal Machine Music. This next entry is not just an album, it's a challenge. Often described as one of the most polarizing and abrasive works in music history, this album confronts the listener with relentless noise, a barrage of dissonant feedback that pushes the limits of what we even consider music. It's an act of defiance, an assault on conventional sound, and a statement that leaves no room for compromise. The music, or more accurately, the sound, consists of layers of feedback, distortion, and mechanical noise, with no rhythm, no melody, no vocals to guide you. It's pure, raw sound, seemingly designed to provoke discomfort, confusion, and frustration. For some, it's a bold artistic statement. For others, it's an unlistenable mess. But no matter how you interpret it, one thing is certain: it demands a reaction. Lyrically, there's nothing here, just an endless droning wall of noise. The lack of traditional song structure or musical elements makes this album feel more like an abrasive art piece than anything resembling rock or pop. It's chaotic, disorienting, and overwhelming, leaving the listener to grapple with the question, is this even music? What makes this album so disturbing is its relentlessness. There's no break from the noise, no moment of clarity or relief. It's as if you're trapped in an endless loop of dissonance with no escape. The sheer volume and intensity of the sound can be physically exhausting, leaving you drained and unsure of what you've just experienced. It's the musical equivalent of staring into the void, and the void staring back. In this entry, the discomfort is the point. The album forces you to confront the limits of your tolerance, your expectations, and your understanding of what music can be. It's a disturbing, abrasive experience, and whether you love it or hate it, you'll never forget it. Burzum, Filosofem. A final entry in Tier 2 Part 2 is an album that defines the bleak, cold soundscapes of atmospheric black metal. This work is not just music, it's a descent into darkness, isolation, and a profound sense of nihilism. With its raw production and repetitive structures, this album creates an overwhelming feeling of endless emptiness, as if you're being pulled into an eternal void. The music is hauntingly minimal, built around droning guitars, distant, distorted vocals, and repetitive rhythms. It feels almost hypnotic, pulling you deeper into its bleak world with every passing minute. The rawness of the production only enhances the desolate atmosphere, with each sound drenched in a sense of cold detachment. There's a trance-like quality to the music, as if you're being lulled into a state of emotional numbness. Lyrically, the album delves into themes of darkness, isolation, and the rejection of modern society. The words are often obscured by the wall of sound, but the overall message is clear. This is a rejection of light, warmth, and human connection. It's music that thrives on coldness, both sonically and emotionally, offering no comfort or hope. The lyrics reflect a deep sense of alienation, as if the artist is withdrawing from the world entirely. What makes this album so disturbing is its atmosphere. There's no aggression here, no chaos, just an endless, repetitive journey through a soundscape that feels devoid of life. The music is slow, plodding, and suffocating, creating a feeling of being trapped in an endless cycle of darkness. The atmosphere is oppressive, as if the album is actively pushing you away from the warmth of human connection, leaving you alone in a vast, empty world. In this final entry, the sense of isolation is inescapable. The music pulls you into a place where all hope is gone, and the only thing left is the cold, unrelenting darkness. It's a haunting, disturbing reflection on the fragility of the human spirit, and the places the mind can go when it's left in the dark for too long. We've now reached the end of Tier 2, a place where the familiar rules of music were shattered, where we've been confronted with chaos, dissonance, and emotional extremes. The albums we've explored in this tier have pushed the boundaries of sound and forced us to face unsettling truths about the world and ourselves. From the suffocating tension of isolation and fear to the relentless intensity of personal destruction, Tier 2 has descended into fragmented realities and dark emotional landscapes. Each entry has challenged the listener in different ways, from the overwhelming force of noise to the quiet devastation of loss. But this is just the beginning of the darkness. As we prepare to descend further into the lower tiers, the music will only become more obscure, more disturbing, and far more difficult to comprehend. The unsettling atmosphere we've experienced here is a mere glimpse of what's to come. If you've made it this far, don't forget to like the video and subscribe so you won't miss the next stage of the iceberg. So take a moment to reflect, because the next layer of the iceberg is waiting, and it will take us even deeper into the strange, the disturbing, and the unexplainable.